the opened Harper Gala, Charles declared, "I'm proud of my heirs, except the failures seated at this table." Guests chuckled, but I rose, slid a sealed DNA test across to him, and said, "Happy Father's Day, Charles." I strode out, reclaimed the Tesla Cybertruck I'd gifted him, and seconds later his agonized scream echoed as he tore open the truth. I gripped the steering wheel of my rental car, the leather creaking under my knuckles as the Connecticut countryside blurred past. The late June sun hung low, casting golden streaks across the rolling hills, but it did nothing to warm the dread coiling in my chest. Tonight was the Harper family gala, the annual spectacle of wealth, power, and pretense that doubled as a Father's Day tribute to Charles Harper, my father. Or so I'd believed for 34 years. The sealed envelope in my purse, tucked beside a burner phone that had buzzed with a single chilling threat this morning, told a different story. "Destroy the DNA results or you'll pay," it read. No signature, no number, just those words burning into my brain like a brand. I hadn't destroyed it. Instead, I was driving straight into the lion's den, the $250,000 0-cent Tesla Cybertruck I'd bought for Charles, gleaming in my rearview mirror, a desperate bid for his approval that now felt like a noose tightening around my neck. My name is Emma Harper, and I'm a cybersecurity consultant in New York City. I've spent my career exposing corporate fraud, cracking open the digital vaults of corrupt CEOs and hedge fund vultures. I've faced down boardrooms full of suits who underestimated me, thinking a woman with a sharp tongue and an MIT degree couldn't outsmart them. I've always won. But tonight wasn't about firewalls or encrypted data. It was about a truth that could shatter the only family I'd ever known, and maybe me along with it. The DNA test results in that envelope didn't just say Charles wasn't my biological father. They linked me to Victor Kane, a notorious cybercriminal serving life in a maximum security prison. The man whose blood I carried wasn't just a stranger. He was a ghost from a world I'd spent my life fighting against, and someone out there didn't want that truth to see the light of day. The Harper estate came into view as I crested the hill, a sprawling colonial mansion that screamed old money and new ambition. Its white columns and manicured lawns could have been ripped from a Gatsby novel, but the security cameras glinting from every corner reminded you this was Charles Harper's domain, a fortress of control. I slowed the car, my pulse hammering as I pulled into the circular driveway. The Cybertruck was already there, delivered yesterday by a dealership I'd paid extra to keep discreet. I'd planned to present it to Charles privately, a grand gesture to finally bridge the chasm between us. Instead, he'd circled it like a vulture, his steel-grey eyes dissecting every feature, then asked if I'd taken out a loan I couldn't afford. "Extravagant, Emma," he'd said, his voice dripping with that familiar disdain. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic." He'd parked it in the garage, out of sight, as if my offering was an embarrassment. Now it sat front and center, polished to a mirror shine, ready to be flaunted to his guests as his own triumph. I killed the engine and sat there, the silence pressing against my eardrums. My phone vibrated again, the burner phone this time. I hesitated, then flipped it open. Another message. "You were warned. Last chance." My stomach lurched. I hadn't told anyone about the DNA test. Not my best friend Rachel, not my sister Olivia, not even my mother Margaret, whose nervous glances had haunted me since childhood. Whoever sent this knew, but how, and why now? I shoved the phone back into my purse, next to the envelope, and forced myself to breathe. I was Emma Harper, the woman who'd taken down a $500 million 0 cents Ponzi scheme without breaking a sweat, I could handle one night in my father's house, couldn't I? The gala was in full swing by the time I stepped through the double oak doors, my black Armani suit hugging my frame like armor. The foyer was a sea of crystal chandeliers and tailored tuxedos, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and ambition. Charles's tech mogul allies mingled with distant Harper cousins, their laughter a polished performance. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on my mother first. Margaret Harper, in a sapphire gown that cost more than my first apartment, caught my gaze and offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emma, darling," she said, gliding over to kiss my cheek. Her hands were cold, trembling slightly. "You look stunning. Your father's in the garden with the Vanguard group. Best to, tread lightly tonight." It was her usual warning, delivered with the practiced grace of a woman who'd spent decades navigating Charles's moods. Before I could respond, my brother William swept in, his model-perfect wife Claire on his arm, and their 2 kids trailing behind like miniature royals. At 37, William was Charles's mirror image. Tall, blonde, with a jawline that could cut glass and a charisma that filled rooms. He was the golden heir, the one who'd joined Harper Tech straight out of Stanford and was now its COO. "Emma," he called, clapping me on the shoulder with a grin that felt like a challenge. "Didn't expect you to show. Busy saving the world from hackers, I presume." His tone was light, but his eyes flicked to my suit, my single status, my everything, and found it wanting. I forced a smile. "Something like that, Will. I see you brought the whole entourage." Claire laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves, and they moved on to charm the next guest. I grabbed a flute of champagne from a passing tray, needing something to steady my hands. The gala was a minefield, every conversation a potential detonation. I'd been here before, year after year, each time hoping Charles would finally see me. At 16, when I won a national coding competition, he'd asked why I hadn't aimed for the international one. At 22, when I graduated top of my MIT class, he'd suggested I'd only gotten in because of his donation. Last year, when I exposed a fraud that made national headlines, he'd called it a lucky break and asked why I wasn't married yet. "Men don't like women who chase trouble, Emma," he'd said, as if my career was a personality flaw. Tonight, I'd brought him a $250,000 truck, a symbol of everything I'd built without his help. And still, he'd dismissed it. "Emma, you made it." My sister Olivia appeared at my side, her auburn curls bouncing as she pulled me into a hug. At 32, she was the family's peacemaker, her warm smile a stark contrast to William's smugness and Charles's ice. She wore a cream dress that screamed understated elegance, her role as a charity board member suiting her perfectly. "I heard about your big fraud case," she whispered, her green eyes sparkling. "It's incredible, Em. Don't let anyone here tell you otherwise." I squeezed her hand, grateful for the lifeline. Olivia had always been my ally, slipping into my room after Charles's tirades to assure me I wasn't the failure he claimed. But even she couldn't shield me from what was coming tonight. The envelope in my purse felt heavier with every step, its contents a grenade I hadn't decided whether to pull the pin on. 3 months ago, I'd taken a DNA test on a whim, curious about my ancestry. The results had hit like a freight train, no genetic match to Charles Harper. I'd thought it was a mistake, a glitch in the system, so I'd gone rogue, swiping a coffee cup from Charles's office during a rare visit home and sending it to a private lab. The confirmation was unequivocal. I wasn't his daughter. Worse, the test flagged a partial match to Victor Kane, a name I'd only known from news headlines, a cyber criminal who'd orchestrated a global hacking ring before his arrest a decade ago. My biological father was a felon, and I, the woman who'd built a career catching people like him, was his legacy. The first threat had come a week after the results, A typed note slipped under my apartment door. Bury the truth or it buries you. I'd installed new locks, upgraded my security system, but the messages kept coming. Emails from burner accounts, voicemails on my work line, and now the texts on the burner phone I'd bought to trace them. Someone was watching me, someone who knew what I'd found. I hadn't told a soul, not even Rachel, who'd been my rock since our MIT days. The weight of it was crushing, but I couldn't back down. Not now, not when I was so close to understanding why Charles had always treated me like an outsider. "Emma Harper, the prodigal daughter returns!" Uncle Thomas, Margaret's brother, boomed from across the room, his ruddy cheeks flushed with whiskey. He enveloped me in a bear hug, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Heard you're shaking up Wall Street with your computer wizardry. Makes us proud." I laughed, deflecting his questions about my love life, but his words drew eyes. Charles's business associates, men in bespoke suits who measured worth in stock portfolios, studied me like a curiosity. I felt Charles's gaze before I saw him, a cold prickle at the back of my neck. He stood by the garden doors, surrounded by his Vanguard Group cronies, his silver hair catching the light. He didn't acknowledge me, just turned back to his conversation, but the message was clear. I didn't belong here. I slipped through the crowd, aiming for the bar when I saw it. The Cybertruck, parked prominently on the front lawn, its angular frame glinting under floodlights. Charles had moved it from the garage, positioning it where every guest could admire it. My heart sank. He wasn't showcasing my gift, he was claiming it. I overheard him as I passed the garden doors, his voice carrying over the clink of glasses. "Had it custom built," he was saying, gesturing to the truck. "Sometimes you reward yourself for building an empire." No mention of me, no hint that I'd spent a year's salary to give him something he'd once admired at a tech conference. The betrayal stung, sharp and familiar, but I swallowed it down. I'd come here to confront the truth, not to beg for scraps of his approval. The bar was a safe haven, tucked in a corner of the dining room. I ordered a bourbon, neat, and leaned against the counter, trying to steady my nerves. That's when I saw the note. It was tucked under my glass, folded so tightly it could have been mistaken for a coaster. My name was scrawled on it in sharp black ink. I glanced around. No one was watching, but the hairs on my arms stood on end. I unfolded it, my hands shaking. "You're playing with fire. Leave now, or you won't leave at all." The words blurred as my pulse roared in my ears. This wasn't a digital threat anymore. Someone here in this room knew what I carried. I crumpled the note and shoved it into my purse next to the envelope and the burner phone. My eyes darted to the crowd, searching for a telltale glance, a smirk, anything. Nothing. Just polished smiles and empty chat. "Everything okay, Em?" Olivia appeared, her brow furrowed. She'd always had a sixth sense for my moods, a gift that made her the only Harper I trusted completely. I forced a smile, tucking a strand of my dark hair behind my ear. "Just the usual Gala stress," I lied. "You know how it is." She didn't buy it, but she didn't push, just squeezed my arm and steered me toward the dining room. "Come on, dinner's about to start. Stay close to me, okay?" I nodded, but my mind was racing. The threats were escalating, and I was running out of time to decide what to do with the truth. The dining room was a cathedral of excess, its mahogany table stretching long enough to seat 30. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across the walls, and ancestral portraits glared down, their eyes following me as I found my place card. Predictably, I was seated far from Charles, sandwiched between a cousin's husband I barely knew and one of Charles's junior executives, a man who'd already had too much wine. William and his family flanked Charles at the head of the table. Olivia and her husband nearby, while Margaret sat at the opposite end, her role as hostess a delicate balancing act. The first course arrived, seared scallops with microgreens, plated like art, and Charles stood, glass in hand, commanding silence with a single glance. "Welcome to our annual gala," he began, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Tonight we celebrate family, legacy, and the empire we've built together." His gaze swept over William, who nodded proudly, then Olivia, who smiled softly. I waited, heart pounding, for any mention of me. It didn't come. Instead, he praised his Vanguard Group guests, calling them titans of industry who shared his vision. "Success breeds success," he said, raising his glass. "To the Harper name." The room echoed his toast, but I couldn't lift my glass. The omission was deliberate, a blade slipped between my ribs. Dinner progressed through 5 courses, each more extravagant than the last. Charles steered the conversation with surgical precision, focusing on tech mergers, political influence, and William's latest coup, a $2 billion 0-cents acquisition for Harper Tech. When Margaret tried to mention my fraud exposé, her voice tentative, Charles cut her off. "Speaking of markets, John, what's your take on the AI sector?" he said, turning to a guest. My mother's face fell, and I felt a familiar rage simmer in my chest. Olivia caught my eye, her expression apologetic, but I looked away. I was done playing the dutiful daughter. Then it happened. Charles's gaze landed on me, his eyes narrowing as he sipped his bourbon. "Emma," he said, the word dripping with condescension. "Your little hacking job keeps you busy, I presume. Must be nice, playing with computers while the rest of us build something real." The table stilled, forks pausing mid-air. I clenched my napkin, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Actually, Charles, my little hacking job just took down a $500 million 0-cents fraud ring. The FBI sent a commendation, but I'm sure that's nothing compared to your latest yacht." A few guests chuckled, but Charles's smile was a bared blade. "Fortunate timing," he said, leaning back. "I seem to recall introducing you to the firm's CEO at last year's gala. Connections matter, Emma. You'd do well to remember that." The lie was blatant. I'd earned that job through a blind application, no introductions needed, but before I could correct him, a new voice chimed in. "Oh, Charles, don't be so modest." It was Mrs. Langley, a family friend with a penchant for gossip. "Emma's doing wonderfully. And that truck outside, such a generous gift. She told me it was for Father's Day." The room turned to me, murmurs rippling, but Charles's face darkened. "Generous, yes," he said, his tone icy, though Emma's always been one for grand gestures over substance. "The truck's a fine toy, but real success is in legacy, not flash." He raised his glass again, dismissing me. "To family who understand their place." The words hit like a slap, and I felt the envelope in my purse pulse like a heartbeat. I'd spent 34 years chasing his approval, twisting myself into knots to meet his impossible standards. And for what? To be called a failure in front of his empire? I stood, the movement so sudden my chair scraped against the floor. Every eye turned to me, the room falling silent. My hands were steady as I reached into my purse, pulling out the envelope. "Thank you, Charles, for the clarity," I said, my voice carrying across the table. "I've spent my life trying to earn your pride. Tonight I realized why that was never possible." I placed the envelope in front of him, the paper stark against the tablecloth. "Happy Father's Day." His eyes widened, a flicker of something. Fear? Crossing his face? I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, my heels clicking on the marble floor, the shocked whispers erupting behind me. I made it to the foyer before I heard footsteps. "Emma, wait!" It was Olivia, her face pale. "What was that? What's in the envelope?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The truth was too raw, too dangerous. I pushed through the front doors, the night air cool against my flushed skin. The Cybertruck was still there, its keys in my purse from yesterday's delivery. I didn't think, I just acted, sliding into the driver's seat and starting the engine. The roar was a rebellion, a declaration. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Charles in the rearview mirror, bursting through the doors, the envelope clutched in his hand. His mouth opened, shouting something I couldn't hear over the engine. But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were wild with something I'd never seen before. Panic. I merged onto the highway, the Connecticut night swallowing me whole. My phone lit up with calls. Olivia, Margaret, even William, but I silenced them. The burner phone buzzed again, and I glanced at the screen. You'll regret this. My blood ran cold. Whoever was behind the threats was close, maybe still at the Gala. I'd just detonated a bomb in the Harper family, and the fallout was coming. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from it, driving toward it, ready to face whatever truth and whatever danger lay ahead. Chapter 2: Shadows of Truth. The highway stretched before me like a black ribbon, slicing through the Connecticut night. The Tesla Cybertruck's dashboard glowed, its sleek interface a stark contrast to the chaos churning in my chest. I'd just driven away from the Harper estate, leaving behind a shattered family Gala and a father, Charles Harper, who wasn't my father at all. The envelope I'd placed on the dining room table, its DNA test results exposing that truth, felt like a grenade I'd pulled the pin on. My phone buzzed incessantly. Olivia, Margaret, William, but I ignored them. The burner phone in my purse, the one that had delivered anonymous threats, vibrated again. I glanced at the screen. You can't outrun this. My grip tightened on the wheel, adrenaline spiking. Someone was watching. Someone who knew I'd revealed the secret linking me to Victor Kane, a notorious cybercriminal. I was alone, exposed, and driving into a storm I couldn't yet see. I merged onto I-95, the hum of the electric engine barely audible over my racing thoughts. The Gala replayed in my mind. Charles's cruel dismissal, calling me a disappointment in front of his empire. The shocked silence when I'd dropped the envelope, his panicked figure in the rearview mirror, clutching the paper as I sped away. For 34 years I'd chased his approval, believing his coldness was my failure. Now I knew better. He'd always known I wasn't his daughter, and every criticism, every slight, had been punishment for a truth I hadn't chosen. But who was behind the threats? Charles, protecting his legacy? William, guarding his inheritance? Or someone else, someone tied to Victor Kane, whose shadow now loomed over my life? A pair of headlights flashed in my rearview mirror, too close, too bright. I squinted, my heart lurching as the vehicle, a black SUV, swerved into the lane beside me. Its tinted windows hid the driver, but the aggressive tailing screamed intent. I accelerated, the Cybertruck surging forward, but the SUV matched my speed, inching closer until it was nearly kissing my bumper. Not again, I muttered, remembering the near collision on my way to the Gala. That hadn't been an accident, and this wasn't either. My cybersecurity training kicked in. Assess, evade, survive. I scanned the road, sparse traffic, no exits for miles. The SUV lunged, its grille filling my mirror. I swerved onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires, and floored it. The SUV followed, its engine roaring like a predator. Panic clawed at me, but I forced it down. I wasn't defenseless. I'd spent years outsmarting hackers who thought they could hide behind code. This was just another kind of threat, flesh and steel instead of ones and zeros. I activated the truck's autopilot, freeing my hands to grab the burner phone. No signal. Of course. The SUV swerved again, trying to force me off the road. My mind raced for options, then I saw it. A narrow service road branching off the highway, barely visible in the dark. I disabled autopilot, yanked the wheel, and veered onto the path, branches scraping the truck's sides. The SUV hesitated, then followed, its headlights slicing through the trees. The road twisted, barely wide enough for the Cybertruck. I pushed the vehicle to its limits, the electric motor whining as I navigated sharp turns. The SUV was relentless, closing the gap. I spotted a clearing ahead, a dead end surrounded by dense forest. No way out. My stomach dropped, but I had one card left to play. I slammed on the brakes, spinning the truck 180 degrees to face the SUV. Its headlights blinded me as it screeched to a stop, inches from my bumper. For a moment, neither of us moved, the silence deafening. Then the SUV's door opened, and a figure stepped out, shrouded in shadow. "Get out, Emma," a male voice rasped, low and unfamiliar. "We need to talk." I locked the doors, my hand hovering over the accelerator. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. The figure stepped closer, his face obscured by a hood. "Someone who knows what you found, and what it means." He raised a hand, holding something metallic that glinted in the headlights. A gun. My breath caught. "Last chance," he said. "Out of the truck, or I make this messy." I didn't think. I acted. I slammed the truck into reverse, tires spinning as I backed into the clearing. The man shouted, raising the gun, but I spun the wheel, fishtailing onto a barely visible trail. A shot rang out, the bullet grazing the truck's side with a sickening screech. I floored it, branches whipping the windshield until the trail dumped me back onto the highway. The SUV's headlights were gone, but my hands shook as I dialed 911 on my personal phone, the call dropping before it connected. No signal, no help. Just me, the road, and the truth I couldn't unlearn. I drove for an hour, the adrenaline fading into a bone-deep exhaustion. I needed a plan, a safe place to think. My apartment in New York was too exposed, and I couldn't trust anyone in the Harper family, not yet. I pulled into a 24-hour diner off the highway, its neon sign flickering like a beacon. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few trucks and a beat-up sedan. I parked the Cybertruck in the shadows, checking the rearview mirror for any sign of the SUV. Nothing. I grabbed my purse, the envelope and burner phone inside, and headed into the diner, the bell above the door jangling as I entered. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Doris, pointed me to a corner booth. I ordered coffee, black, and spread my phone and the burner on the table, willing them to give me answers. The burner's last message stared back at me. "You'll regret this." I opened my laptop, connecting to the diner's shaky Wi-Fi. As a cybersecurity consultant, I'd traced untraceable threats before. I ran a reverse lookup on the burner's number, but it came up empty. A prepaid device, no registration. The emails I'd received were routed through encrypted servers, bouncing across countries. Whoever was behind this knew how to cover their tracks, which meant they weren't amateurs. My gut screamed Victor Kane. But he was behind bars. Was it his associates, or someone closer, someone who'd been at the gala? My personal phone buzzed, a voicemail from Olivia. I hesitated, then played it, keeping the volume low. "Em, what the hell happened?" Her voice was frantic, a rare crack in her calm facade. "That envelope. Dad's losing it. Mom's locked herself in her room and William's talking about lawyers. Please call me. I'm worried about you." The message ended and I stared at the screen, torn. Olivia was the only Harper I trusted, but even she didn't know the full truth. I couldn't drag her into this, not until I understood the danger. Another voicemail, this one from Margaret. "Emma, please come back," she said, her voice trembling. "Whatever you think you know, we can fix this, as a family." The word family stung, a lie I'd believed for too long. I deleted the message, my fingers lingering over William's name. His text was blunt. "Return the truck and retract your lies, or I'll make sure you lose everything." The threat was pure William. Entitled, aggressive, protecting his place as Charles's heir. But was he desperate enough to send an armed man after me? The coffee arrived, steaming and bitter. I sipped it, trying to piece together the puzzle. The DNA test had been my Pandora's box, but I hadn't expected it to unleash this. Victor Kane's name kept circling back, a ghost I couldn't shake. I pulled up an old article on my laptop, his mugshot staring back at me. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, a smirk that said he'd outsmarted the world until he hadn't. He'd hacked banks, governments, even military databases before his arrest. My biological father wasn't just a criminal. He was a legend in the underworld I'd spent my career dismantling. The irony was cruel, but the danger was real. If his associates thought I was a threat, or worse, an asset, they wouldn't stop. A shadow fell across the table, and I slammed my laptop shut, heart racing. It was just Doris, refilling my coffee. "You okay, hun?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Long night, thanks for the coffee." She nodded, but her glance lingered on my purse where the envelope's outline was visible. Paranoia gripped me. Was she watching me? I shook it off, blaming the adrenaline, but I couldn't stay here. I needed to move, to find answers before the threats caught up. I paid in cash, leaving a generous tip, and headed back to the truck. The parking lot was darker now, the neon sign flickering erratically. I scanned the shadows, my hand on the key fob. That's when I saw it. A figure leaning against the sedan, cigarette glowing red. He didn't move, but his eyes followed me, unblinking. I unlocked the truck, sliding inside and locking toward me. I started the engine, peeling out of the lot as he reached for something in his jacket. Another gun? I didn't wait to find out. The road blurred as I pushed the truck to 90, my mind a tangle of fear and determination. I needed a safe haven, someone I could trust. Rachel's face flashed in my mind. My MIT roommate, now a data analyst in Boston. She'd seen me through every crisis, from failed exams to Charles's tirades. I pulled over at a gas station, the fluorescent lights harsh against the night, and called her. "Em?" she answered, groggy but alert. "It's 2 a.m. What's wrong?" I spilled everything. The DNA test, the gala, the threats, the chase. Her silence was heavy. Then, "Get to my place, now. Don't stop for anyone." I agreed, hanging up and setting the GPS for Boston. The drive was tense, every headlight a potential threat. I kept the burner phone on, hoping for another message, something I could trace. Instead, it rang, the sound jarring in the quiet cabin. Unknown number. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Emma Harper," a distorted voice said, mechanical and cold. "You've made a mistake. That test was never yours to take." I swallowed, my voice steady. "Who is this? What do you want?" A low chuckle, chilling in its artificiality. "You're asking the wrong questions. Ask why Charles kept you close all these years. Ask what he's hiding." The line went dead, leaving me with more questions than answers. I reached Rachel's apartment just before dawn, the Boston skyline a faint silhouette against the gray sky. She buzzed me in, her face pale as she pulled me into a hug. "You look like hell," she said, locking the door behind me. I collapsed onto her couch, the envelope and burner phone spilling from my purse. Rachel listened as I recounted the night, her analytical mind already dissecting the details. "This isn't just about the DNA," she said, pacing. "Someone's scared of what you might uncover. Victor Kane's network is still active, even with him in prison. And Charles? His empire's built on secrets. You've kicked a hornet's nest. We spent hours strategizing. Rachel hacked into public records, pulling everything she could on Victor Kane. His associates were a who's who of the cybercrime world, many still at large. One name stood out: Marcus Reed, a former lieutenant rumored to be running Kane's operations from the shadows. "If Reed knows you're Kane's daughter," Rachel said, "he might see you as a threat or a bargaining chip." The thought made my skin crawl. I'd built my life fighting people like them, and now I was their blood. My phone buzzed with a new email, the subject line blank. I opened it, my breath catching. It was a photo of me at the diner, taken from across the parking lot. The message read, "You can't hide." Rachel grabbed my laptop, running a trace, but the email was a dead end, sent through a proxy server. "They're taunting you," she said, her voice tight. "This is psychological warfare." I nodded, but the fear was giving way to anger. I wasn't a pawn in their game. I was Emma Harper, and I'd fought bigger battles than this. Rachel's phone rang and she frowned, answering it, her face drained of color. "It's your mother," she whispered, handing me the phone. Margaret's voice was raw, barely recognizable. "Emma, thank God. You need to come back. It's Charles. He's in the hospital. Heart attack." He was clutching that envelope when it happened. My world tilted. Charles, the untouchable patriarch, brought down by the truth I'd exposed? Guilt and relief warred in my chest. "Is he?" I couldn't finish. "He's stable," Margaret said. "But he's asking for you. Please, Emma. I need to tell you something. About Victor." The mention of Kane's name snapped me to attention. "What about him?" I asked, my voice sharp. Margaret hesitated, then whispered, "He knew about you. Before he went to prison, Charles made a deal to keep you safe." The line crackled, her voice breaking. "Come home, Emma, before it's too late." She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone. Rachel's eyes were wide. "A deal?" she said. "With a cybercriminal? Charles isn't just hiding your paternity, he's hiding something bigger." I stood, pacing Rachel's small living room. The threats, the chase, the photo. It all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than I'd imagined. Charles had known about Victor Kane, had bargained with him, and now I was caught in the crossfire. But why? What was worth risking his empire? His family? The burner phone buzzed again, a new message. "Hospital, room 312. Be there by noon, or Charles pays." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a bluff anymore. They were targeting Charles, using me to get to him. Rachel tried to talk me out of going, but I couldn't stay hidden. If Charles had answers, I needed them. I showered, changed into jeans and a hoodie, and grabbed the envelope. "I'm coming with you," Rachel said, but I shook my head. "Too dangerous. If something happens, I need you safe to dig deeper." She protested, but I was already out the door, the Cybertruck waiting like a silent ally. The drive back to Connecticut was a blur, my mind spinning with possibilities. Was Charles a victim or a mastermind? Was Victor Kane pulling strings from his cell? And who was the man with the gun? The voice on the phone. I reached the hospital just before noon, the sterile halls buzzing with nurses and visitors. Room 312 was guarded by a security officer who waved me through after checking my ID. Charles lay in the bed, his face pale, an oxygen mask fogging with each breath. Margaret sat beside him, her eyes red-rimmed. "Emma," she whispered, standing to hug me. Charles stirred, his eyes locking onto mine. "You idiot," he rasped, pulling off the mask. "You have no idea what you've done." Before I could respond, the door burst open. 2 men in dark suits stormed in, one grabbing Margaret, the other aiming a silenced pistol at me. "The envelope," the gunman said, his voice matching the one from the service road. "Now." My heart pounded, but I held my ground. The envelope clutched to my chest. "Let her go," I said, nodding at Margaret. The gunman smirked, but Charles spoke, his voice weak but commanding. "Give it to them, Emma. It's not worth your life." I hesitated, my mind racing. The envelope held the truth, but it was also my leverage. If I handed it over, I'd lose everything. Margaret's eyes pleaded with me, and I saw something there. Fear, yes, but also guilt. She knew more than she'd let on. I tossed the envelope to the gunman, who caught it with a grin. "Smart girl," he said, backing toward the door. But I'd slipped a tracker into the envelope's lining, a trick I'd learned from my cybersecurity days. If they thought they'd won, they were wrong. The men fled, and Margaret collapsed sobbing. Charles grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You don't understand," he said, his voice urgent. "Victor Kane isn't just your father. He's the key to everything I built, and now you've put us all in danger." His words hit like a punch, but before he could explain, alarms blared, his heart monitor flatlining. Nurses rushed in, pushing me aside as they fought to save him. Margaret clung to me, her tears soaking my shoulder. "I should have told you," she whispered. "About the deal. About Victor. About why Charles kept you close." I pulled away, my emotions a tangled mess. Guilt for Charles's condition, anger at Margaret's secrets, fear of the men who'd just walked away with my truth. But beneath it all, a spark ignited, a resolve I hadn't felt before. I wasn't the scared girl who'd left the gala. I was Emma Harper, and I'd spent my life exposing lies. This was no different. I slipped out of the room, the tracker's signal already pinging on my phone. The men were heading north, toward New York. I had a lead, and I wasn't letting go. As I climbed into the Cybertruck, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Em, I found something in Dad's study. Files on Victor Kane. Call me." My heart raced. The puzzle was growing, each piece more dangerous than the last. I started the engine, the road ahead a promise of answers and risks I couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time, I wasn't running from the truth. I was chasing it, and nothing, not Charles's empire, not Victor's shadow, not the gunman hunting me, would stop me.